This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello and welcome to Ahval Forum. We are going to discuss Eastern Mediterranean. Egypt and Greece scatter Turkish cards in Mediterranean. That's the headline with Ahval today. Actually, it's such a crisis that when you think it's sort of easing, it gets even more complicated. The moment you have that sense, you get puzzled. This is the situation right now developing in the Eastern Mediterranean. On Friday, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan said, after the prayers in what he calls Hagia Sophia Mosque, that Turkey was resuming drilling activity in the Eastern Mediterranean, and he denounced the maritime deal Greece and Egypt had signed yesterday, a maritime agreement. And he said this agreement between Greece and Egypt does not count for anything. And also adding that he was sending the drill ship Barbaros Hayrettin again to the already heated Eastern Mediterranean waters. We are going to discuss this situation, both the Egypt-Greece deal, what it means, and where we are at the moment, because the eyes of the world are not really focused on this crisis, which is eruptive, which is potentially explosive, given the unpredictability of Erdogan administration especially, and also given the rather aloof attitude from the European Union. My guests are both from Greece, one Turkish and one Greek expert. Yannis Koutsomitis, the chief editor of Kappa News based in Athens, and Ahval columnist Professor Cengiz Aktar. Welcome, Yannis. Welcome, Cengiz.
Hello.
Let's begin with you, Yannis. The deal, the treaty or the pact or whatever we should call it yesterday between Greece and Egypt seems to be a new game changer. Whether or not it scatters the Turkish cards in Mediterranean, it's another issue. But can you walk us through this deal, what it is, and
Yes.
Why it has been signed just the time it was signed?
Yes, exactly. Well, Greece has been trying to close a deal with Egypt for quite some time now. It's almost 15 years since the start of talks with Egypt for delimitation of maritime borders in Eastern Mediterranean. The Egyptians were always reluctant in making an agreement that would somehow irritate Turkey regarding the Castellorizo issue, which is a small island very near the coast of Turkey. And Egypt was trying to persuade the Greek side that it would be better to make a partial delimitation that would involve the portion of the maritime zones that are west of the 28th meridian, which is just in the middle of Rhodes Island, and west of that until, let's say, the middle of Crete. So all that region was agreed yesterday. Greece made a small gesture to Egypt, which is about, let's say, a rough figure, about 10% less effect of Crete and the other two small islets that are southeast of Crete. And the Egyptians...
Gesture or concessions?
Well, concessions, let's say, yes, it's a better expression, which is, I think it's doesn't make any difference, which is just 10% north than the median line. So we have also, which is, we should also take note that the Egyptian side didn't want the delimitation to reach the far west line of the Egyptian border in order not to mingle in a possible delimitation agreement with Libya in the future. So there is a bit in the western part of the agreement that it's still under discussion how far more to the west the limits will go, west of the almost 26th meridian that was in agreement. And the overall sense and the scope of the Greek side was to break the Turkish Tripolitanian Libyan agreement, memorandum of understanding that was reached last November, and that stretched the Turkish exclusive economic zone up to the west side in eastern Libya.
Mm-hmm. Now, statements are interesting because Dendias, the Greek foreign minister, basically declared the Turkish GNA Libyan agreement as more or less, he didn't use these words, but more or less null and void or invalid. Whereas hours after the signing ceremony of the Greek-Egyptian deal, first Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu declared this deal null and void, and it was more or less repeated by President Erdoğan. So we are in a very, very complicated situation. I mean, especially these sort of, discussing these international treaties in these terms bring us to another dimension, I suppose.
Yes, yes. Well, let me give you the Greek perspective. It's not been spoken out very eloquently, but the context is the following. Greece closed an agreement, reached an agreement with Italy some month ago for an Ionian Sea. There, also Greece made concessions to Italy regarding two small islands in the Ionian Sea. Now it's reaching an agreement with Egypt, also with some concession, about 10%. The Greeks consider that a very reasonable gesture towards Turkey, saying, look, we're not insisting on a 100% maximum reach of Castellorizo and the other two small islands in the region. Let's sit down and we can make concessions to you as well. And if we can agree on the exact percentage of the concessions, then we can go to the Hague International Court and they can reach a decision. But the Greeks said, okay, we've shown with two other countries that we're not insisting on 100% maritime zone sovereign rights over those islands, especially since the eastern smaller island east of Castellorizo is uninhabited. And if that small island, Strongili, I don't know the name in Turkish, is excluded or does not have territorial or maritime rights, then Greece will not reach, Greece's zone will not reach Cyprus's, whatever north or south, Cyprus's maritime zone, which was an initial goal of the Greek and the Greek Cypriot side for the two exclusive zones to be combined and to reach each other just south of Castellorizo. So there is a window of opportunity if there were some reasonable government in Turkey to sit down now with Greece and Egypt and find an agreement for that side of the Turkish maritime zone claims. And if there is no agreement in bilateral or trilateral talks, then the parties could go together to the Hague Tribunal and Court, and reach an agreement there. But we have to deal with a government or a regime or whatever you may call it in Ankara, who believe that the Mavi Vatan, the Blue Homeland doctrine, does not take into account these small figures. Turkey is a huge country. It has interests in the Eastern Mediterranean and should extend its maritime zones to the east and the west unilaterally and as it pleases, or as the admirals in a Turkish armed forces please. So now we have this situation. Mr. Erdogan is very angry. He says that that the Greeks and the Egyptians betrayed a formal agreement they gave with Miss Merkel. And now we are coming to the next episode of this saga, and we'll see how this stands.
Cengiz, as of August 7th, today, a new situation. Yannis mentioned anger of Ankara, Erdoğan, but also, to say the least, there is disappointment amongst the designers of the Mavi Vatan, Blue Homeland, as of today. And they accuse also Germany as a sort of, center of deceit in this scheme. But going back to the full picture, is the game over for the Turkish side, or are we just in the beginning of a new set of series of crises which may escalate?
Frankly, we don't know. But I mean, what happened yesterday between the two foreign ministers, this partial deal between Greece and Egypt, had really a bomb effect in Ankara and elsewhere in Turkey.
Apparently, it was unexpected. Apparently,
frankly, I mean, I'm very surprised. I mean, how come it was unexpected? It's perfectly possible because there is no more foreign ministry in Turkey. I mean, the foreign issues are dealt with some individuals, very obscure individuals in the presidential palace, and by some retired admirals, as we know. So that's it, and it's possible that they were not aware. I mean, but mind you, I mean, Turkey has no embassy. I mean, the Turkish ambassador in there's no Turkish ambassador in Cairo, and so
there is only one in Athens.
Yeah, definitely, but I'm not sure whether he's that informed. Yes.
But excuse me for interrupting. It was in Greek news all around the last 2 or 3 weeks that a good deal is imminent with Egypt.
Of course, I know.
And I'm sure
I mean,
that the Turkish government is reading the Greek newspaper, so they should have known.
Well, and anyhow, I mean, the reactions is, the 5 set of reactions. First, the so-called amateurish policymakers, the retired admirals, were furious. I mean, the architects of the Blue Homeland, Mavi Vatan, Cem Gürdeniz and Cihat Yaycı, were furious. I mean, the second reaction came from the 180 years old Turkish Foreign Ministry, which was set in 1840. I have never ever read, a press communique of that caliber coming from a serious ministry. They were calling an international agreement, because mind you, this agreement is within the framework of 1982 UNCLOS, the United Nations Sea at Law agreement. I mean, it's within this framework. Both countries are signatory to this agreement, and the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, while referring to the deal of yesterday, was calling this agreement with an epithet, so-called. It's unseen, unheard. It's totally lacking the slightest diplomatic manner. You can perfectly not agree with something which is happening,
beyond your control,
somewhere else. Yeah, exactly. I mean but you cannot call it so-called. It's really very shocking, frankly. The third is that came last night and this morning, apparently, and it was confirmed to me a few hours ago. The exploratory talks that were reinitiated by Frau Merkel, set for the 24th of August, were unilaterally cancelled by Ankara. That's the third reaction. And the fourth one happened just now when the president was out of the Hagia Sophia after the Friday prayers, where he said all sorts of ununderstandable things that Greece and Egypt has nothing to do with the sea border and this sort of things, totally irrelevant. But at the end of the day, he announced that the prospect, the prospects will continue. He mentioned Barbaros ship,
drill ship.
He didn't mention confused. No, I think all in all, it's okay. Yes. They were afraid, and they were caught, kind of. This is where we are.
They were caught, you said.
Yes. I mean, they were not expecting this, really. I mean, because they were so sure of their deeds and of their pretensions that they were not expecting such a thing, and I mean that made them really out of themselves, because this agreement cancels and supersedes the Tripoli-Ankara agreement of the sea delimitation, of course.
So the so-called pre-exploratory talks are over, intermediated by Chancellor Merkel. Also, exploratory talks about the exploratory talks that were designed are over, and Barbaros ship is again sailing off towards these waters, and it's back to the old language. So where does it leave us, and where does it get us? To which direction? Yannis or Cengiz, can you elaborate on that? Are we back to square one?
Yannis.
Yes, I think Mr. Erdogan feels that he needs to make a score here. He needs to show to the audience, to his party followers, to the Turkish society, that he can dominate in Eastern Mediterranean. That's apparently not the case. And now, since yesterday,
at least dominate the agenda.
Yeah,
perhaps.
and since yesterday, the Greek, let's say, diplomatic or policy side is much more stronger now, because it is based on a legitimate international agreement, which was not the case until a few days ago. And now I think some of the international powers, like France maybe, or other powers as well, may just put the issue even in the Security Council if things turn really bad. I was a bit surprised yesterday by a mention by ex-Admiral Yashchi, who said that if the conflict came between Greece and Turkey in a confrontation in 15 days ago, then the Greek Navy would be wiped out completely. So some elements in the Turkish armed forces are flirting with an armed confrontation. They think they can gain something, or they think they can make Greece kneel with armed struggle. I don't think that's the case. Even if Greece has some less capacity in its navy, I think some allies will jump in and will not let Mr. Erdogan dominate the scene, especially since now Egypt is on board. There was a declaration also from the United Arab Emirates congratulating the two countries for the agreement. I'm sure Saudis will join as well. So who's looking for a regional conflict that could develop into something unforeseen? No one wants that. But the problem is, how can Mr. Erdogan's eagerness to score political points end at some day? That's
a very interesting juncture, Cengiz. Yannis mentioned, quoted the ex-admiral stating these kind of, applying useful, threatful language. Would it be too far-fetched speculation that those officers or ex-officers whom we know are sworn enemies of Erdoğan and his line are sort of in a cunning way to push him over the cliff?
Oh, it's perfectly possible. But I mean, as of today, the 7th of August, as you mentioned in the beginning, they are on the same board again.
We lost your voice. Can you say? Can you repeat it again?
That was a parenthesis opened probably by Angela Merkel. And it's over. I mean, yes. I mean, it's there was a parenthesis opened by Angela Merkel, and this parenthesis is closed now. I mean, there is no more dialogue, and I think one of the painful consequences of this of the state of affairs is that we have taken note, the world has taken note that it is almost impossible to dialogue with non-democratic countries. And this is, I think, the sheer outcome of what is happening since 48 hours. That is the first one. And the second one is that I'm pretty concerned with what happened in Malta yesterday. The Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu was in Valletta, and he closed all sorts of deals with his EU member counterparts. Yes. And unfortunately, there was another person around. That is the so-called foreign policy czar of the European Union, Signor Borrell. I really wonder what he was doing there, because at the end of this meetings between Turks and the Maltese, was set by the European to make sure that
Cengiz, I think we lost your voice. Can you repeat?
Yes.
What
and the Operation Irini was set up among others by Borrell himself. And yesterday, the Maltese has withdrawn from this operation. So I think Turks and the Maltese have closed some deals there in connection with Libya, because the Libyan foreign minister was also in Valletta. And so that makes me think twice about the intentions now of Ankara, and we may see coming regarding and this cautious with what is happening. It's just it might. I mean, I consider this as a kind of revenge, or a straightforward answer by Ankara to what they consider as a fait accompli between Cairo and Athens.
Mm-hmm. So there are two stages now for potential battle. One is the Eastern Mediterranean, offshore Cyprus and Turkey, and off Castellorizo, and the other one is Libya. Yep. So, Cengiz, as I understand, what you're implying is, given the depth of the crisis,
and a third, it's in Cyprus, in eastern Cyprus, where the other drilling ship is going.
Barbaros.
Barbaros, yes. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's going to be replaced by another one, but that's another angle as well.
Mm-hmm. So, given these elements, we will, I think, face either, to use a Cold War term, balance of terror, which will basically keep everything on edge, or some sort of eruption somewhere, because this is like a slinging gun scenario. If you sling the gun too much, it will basically fire.
When you read what you say, I mean, when you read this with the dire state of the Turkish economy, it's it's a kind of, as we say in French, it's a fuite en avant. I mean, it's raising the stakes to hide something, because the Turkish economy is diving now. It's in the total diving spree. So this kind of adventure becomes more and more likely, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Yannis, to round it up?
Yes, I think the last sentence of Cengiz is very relevant, because with the lira diving towards 7.30, there is little room for the Turkish government to make adventurous policies in Eastern Mediterranean. We've seen how foreigners have withdrawn investments from stocks and positions in Turkey, and my assessment is that Mr. Erdogan will definitely send the drilling ships towards the area, but I think he will not go as far as doing real drilling. And he will try to get something out of this in terms of communication to the generals on the one side and the Turkish public on the other side.
And one final element which we almost forgot is the statement by Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis, basically saying that Greece will no longer approve of hands-off approach of NATO. Cengiz.
Of course, I mean, NATO is nowhere, like the European Union is nowhere in this in all this fuss, and I mean, if there is one concrete, as I see from Greece, a concrete support for Greece.
I think we'll have to get back to Cengiz, but Yannis, what do you say about that?
No one opens the
mouth. It gets better.
They will.
Yes, it's. I think it's
Greece and the Brussels, both of you, totally absent from.
Well, Greece
Cengiz says that Brussels is totally absent from these situations.
Greek patience at NATO is certainly over with the attitude of Mr. Stoltenberg. NATO has been blackmailed by Turkey in the last year or so regarding the deployment of NATO forces in the Baltics and Poland. And now the Turkish veto has been withdrawn. And right now the playing field at NATO is really open. I think Mr. Mitsotakis feels much more stronger politically now in order to show some real force and trying to get allies together. He's shown restraint, he's shown willingness to negotiate, he's shown willingness to make concessions to neighboring countries regarding delimitation. So I don't think there's any reason to expect that Greece will kneel down to Mr. Erdogan's threats.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's basically finish here for the moment. We have been going through the escalating crisis in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now again, after following the Greek-Egyptian deal treaty, Erdogan's statement today means in many ways going back to square one, where it all started, to a sort of a default crisis position. Thank you, Yannis Koutsomitis, editor-in-chief of Kappa News based in Athens.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Cengiz Aktar, columnist with Ahval. Okay, so we'll get back again on this subject, which doesn't seem to let go. Thanks for watching us.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.